Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Truma is Perek Hey Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Daf Mem Ches. We are mamish on top of the Amid, and let us review where we're at. So first of all, the Mishnah, the first Mishnah of the Perek. Here it was on Daf Mem Hey Amid Aleph Mem Hey Amid Beis. The Mishnah gave various cases, including a case where a person had one saw of Truma Temeya that fell into 100 saw of chulin tohirin. In other words, you had the ratio to affect bittul. We also have the rule that since one saw of truma fell in before the issue that it was tamei, you have to remove from the mixture one saw to give to a kohen. And now in our case, since that one saw originated as truma temeya, says Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah, Teiroim, you have to remove the one saw, and then you have to burn that saw. Why do you have to burn that saw? Because that saw is viewed as truma temeya. And the words of Rabbi Eliezer is Sha'ani Yoimer, meaning I, Rabbi Eliezer, say that saw shenafla, he saw also. The one that fell in is the one that you removed. The one that fell in was temeya. You are removing truma temeya. Truma temeya has to be burnt. Okay, came along Rab Simon on Daf Mem Zayin Amid Beis, and he said that the shita of Rabbi Eliezer here in Terumais follows l'shita to that which he said in Masechta Zvachim. What did we have in Masechta Zvachim? A couple of dinim. First of all, if you have a limb from a carbon oila that after you already shechted it and you put the blood on the mizbeach and you cut it into pieces, you now discover that the carbon was a balmum. That means it's not allowed to go on the altar. That limb cannot go on the altar. And there are rules. What happened in the Beis Hamikdash whenever a carbon that was meant to go on the mizbeach became disqualified of going on the mizbeach, there were various fires. Some of them were in the Makim Ha'azara, some of them were outside the on Harabayis. Sometimes we had them outside Yerushalmi and HaKodesh. Those details we learned in Zvachim. And the carbon has to be burnt. Then the Mishnah says, what happens if such limbs got mixed with limbs from a carbon that was unblemished? Being that midrabanan, a limb that's chashuv, something that's chashuv is not nullified, all of karbanos are considered chashuv. So it's sad that the one blemished limb, since it's not batal, disqualifies all of the limbs of going on the mizbeach. Atkan, no argument. Now comes Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says that if a kohen accidentally, not knowing that there's a mixture of blemished limbs with unblemished limbs, took one of those limbs and put it on the altar, let's just say that there was 10 karbanos oila, and one of them was discovered to be a balmum. And let's say the head was the blemish part. Once a kohen put the head on the mizbeach, so Rabbi Eliezer says, we say that the one that was already put on the mizbeach, that was the blemished one. We are allowed to say that, which means that all of the remaining limbs are from unblemished oilers, so they again can be put on the mizbeach. Now over there, obviously in Zavachim, Rabbi Eliezer is using the logic that the one that fell in is the one that was removed, lekula. Here we are using the logic, lechumra. We're making no such differentiation. The concept that we have the right halachically to say that the one that fell in is the one that came out, that is what Rab Simon said, comparing the din and Trumais to the din and Zavachim. That is where we left off. What we're going to have now on Daf Mem Ches, and you have to remember what we just said, you have to chap what we just said, we have the shita of Reb Ze'ero. Reb Ze'ero argues with Rab Simon, and he says that these comparisons are a bad comparison, and he has a different understanding of here the Mishnah and Trumais. What the Gemara Befeirush does not do is explain the Tana Rabbi Eliezer and Zavachim. So we're going to speak out when we learn the Sugya, part of what we learned in Bavli, the Amoira Rabbi Elazar, explaining the Tana Rabbi Eliezer. That will be another way, which l'chu'ura, that will be one of the ways, or probably the way that Rab Ze'eda will have to follow. We'll get to that when we learn it inside. But the Nekuda is like this, that Rab Simon holds that he Sasha Nafla, he Sasha also means that we mamish halachically say that the Truma Temeya that fell in when the balabas has to remove one saw to give to the kohen, that is the one that he removed. So we're not conferring on that saw the status of truma temeya. No, it is truma temeya. Rab Ze'era argues with that. Rab Ze'era holds that even according to the Tana Rabbi Eliezer, we are conferring on the one that you removed the status of truma temeya. Now, just to remind ourselves also, let's review the whole Mishnah. In our Mishnah, the Chachamim argue with Rabbi Eliezer. And the Chachamim hold not Teiroim v'tisaref. No, the Chachamim use the words ta'ale v'teyachel. You take one out, you give it to the kohen, and the kohen is allowed to eat it. Elama, he has to eat it in a way where when he's making it into breads, which means he makes the flour into dough, then he's being machsher, right? You're putting water into it. That already will bring a new issue. The issue is that maybe some of the truma will now become tamei, and we're not allowed to allow truma from becoming tamei. Adarabah, we have an obligation of guarding truma for it not to become tamei. And the Chachamim gave the 4 options that we learned in the Mishnah. Either make small doughs called nikudim. And why is making a small dough a solution? Because even if there is some truma temeya mixed in over here, we don't want to spread that truma. We don't want to make that which the kohen is going to be eat, which is truma. The Chachamim holds it's not really truma. Really, it's chulin. The Chachamim were the ones that conferred on it the status of truma, but truma tohaira. So what's the issue of truma? That's something that we'll have to explain. Now, let's assume there might be some tuma here. When you make doughs lesser than the size of a kibetza, even though the truma tohoira is now wet when you make it into dough, so now it became mukshal lekabel tuma. If the tuma here is less than the size of a kibetza, any food that's tamei cannot impart tuma if it does not have the size of a kibetza. And B'Ashgacha Pratis, for those of us who are learning Rambam, we're now Hoshana Rabba Tavshan Peivav, we mamash just learned this in the Rambam. Okay. Or the other options. The other option is either to eat it koloyos. Koloyos means you don't have to make it into flour at all. You can eat it like popcorn. You can just toast the kernels. Or tiloish b'mei peiros. You can make doughs, but instead of using mayim, you can use fruit juice. And fruit juice is never going to be machsher oichel. Or the 4th option was this chalik le'isos means that you can make large doughs of bread, but you have to take other chulin dough in which there is no tuma issue. Fruit juice is not machsher oichel. It doesn't make it susceptible to becoming tamei. If I have other chulin flour, I'm making that into large doughs. I can take from this mixture a little bit of dough, put it into there. Point is that from the problematic mixture, they'll never be the size of a kibetza. So here again, you're going to end up with big doughs, with big loaves, but you don't have the shear of tuma to be mitame that the truma. The question will be, we have to understand Shitas Chachamim. The Chachamim hold, not like Rabbi Eliezer, that when you remove the saw, we don't say it's truma. We say it's chulin. Elama, the Chachamim conferred on it the din of truma. Why did they make it into truma? Because the Chachamim were afraid that if the balabas will not view that which he removes as truma, he might not give it to a kohen. But it's viewed as truma tohaira. Problem is, if it's viewed as truma tohaira, why do you have to make these solutions of nekudim, etc.? Everything is taught. And all of that would lead us to a big chiddush. And this chiddush can even be used to understand Rabbi Eliezer l'shitas Rab Zeira. And that will also be the final topic of today, which will be really a hagdama for the next 2 daf, Shitas Chizkiah, and listen to these words. We keep on saying, correctly so, that when you have 1 sa'ah of truma that falls into 100 of non-truma, whether it's chulin, whether it's, we already learned, it can be tevel, it can be maiserishin, it can be hegdish, 1 in 100 is nullified. Says the Gemara that the bitul is only vis-a-vis the truma shabai. As far as truma is concerned, that's the case that we're learning about. The 1 saw of truma happened to be tamei, temeya. It fell into chulin tohairin. Truma is not going to be nullified certainly not on the level of a vadai, even though there's 100 tahoirin against the one tamei. So we're separating the concept of bittul truma in non-truma. That, the ratio was 100 to 1. We made a stretch, which everyone makes. Well, if it's nullified, then it's nullified. Hold on. The truma is nullified, which would mean that I'm allowed to eat it. I'm not a kohen. I am not allowed to eat truma. If the truma is nullified, there's no dimua. I'm allowed to eat it. But as far as the problem of truma imparting something tamei, imparting the truma, even though it fell into 100 of tahoirin, we don't say that the truma vadai left. We don't say that. That's going to be a big chap. And you're going to hear it again and again. You're going to see taka. It's gavaldik. These are two separate halachas. Since there is no bittul vis-a-vis the truma, that's going to be really helpful in understanding the Chachamim, and that's going to be really what Chizkiah is going to be teaching us at the end of Daf Mem Ches Amud Beis. That's more or less the synopsis of today's daf. And without any further ado, Chavre, let's dive right in. Okay, so we're coming off Shitas Rab Simon. Rab Simon compares Rabbi Eliezer. He understands him literally. He saw Shanafla, he saw Sha also, which means the way Rab Simon understood it, that the saw that you removed is Truma Temeya Midoiraisa. We don't confer on it the status of Truma. No, it is the one that fell in. So it's Truma, and it's the one that fell in, it's Truma Temeya. Mamish, like the Mishnah in Zavachim. Says Rab Ze'eda Boying. And boy is more like a statement, but he's telling Rab Simon, who told you to understand Pshat of Rabbi Eliezer the way we just explained it? Oy Neymar, maybe. It's amazing that Rab Ze'eda is not unequivocally arguing with Rab Simon, but he's putting a doubt. He's saying, how do you know that's his Pshat? Oy Neymar, or say that Loy Omar Rabbi Eliezer El Mepnei Gedera. Gedera means a geder. Geder means a rabbinic fence. Who told you that he's saying that mamish he saw shanafli, he saw also, which is a big chiddush to say the chances of that happening, right, is 1 in 100. No, maybe not. Maybe, let me use these words, guys. The replacement saw, right, Aviv? These can be the words. The replacement saw, the one that you have to remove. Maybe it's taka nullified. And it's a din and chosh and mishpat, which is I only owned 100. I did not own 101. One was truma. I don't have the right to eat that. So the Chachamim say you have to give one to the kohen. Even according to Rabbi Eliezer, it begins as a financial din, right? So I'm replacement means it's not the original. If I'm replacing it, it's really not truma. The Chachamim confer on it the status of truma, very much like the Chachamim, because they were afraid that if the owner won't view it as truma, he's not going to give it as replacement. People are not that careful when it comes to money sometimes, but they're careful when it comes to, I'm not allowed to eat truma. Now, the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim will still be that the Chachamim hold that it's enough to confer on it the status of truma to hoira for the balabas to give it to the kohen. Rabbi Eliezer just takes it a little bit further, that the Chachamim confer rabbinically the status on the replacement. Truma temeya. They have to make it into truma, if not the guy won't give it to the kohen. Elama, it's not enough for them to say it's truma tohira. Midrabanan, it's truma temeya. It's amazing. Now hold on. If that is the pshat, then I have to say the following. What does Rab Zera do with Rabbi Eliezer and Zavachim? Like, how can he even say that Rabbi Eliezer doesn't mean his words literally? The one that fell in is the one that fell out. Now, here, it's not that difficult to say that. Why not? Because over here, saying that the one that he removes, midrabanan, has a din of truma temeya, the chachamim are allowed to be machmer. So basically, they're telling the owner, you have to give it to the kohen. Elamai, the Rabbi Eliezer says, the kohen has to burn it, because it's truma temeya. Now, there's a problem with that, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, and that is, why would you have to burn it? Something that's tamei midoiraisa has to be burnt. Something that's tamei midrabanan, or the best you can say is maybe it's tamei. Maybe some of it is a truma tameya. Okay, even safek truma is not burnt. It's a big rule because you have a problem. If it's tamei, you can't eat it. You have to burn it. If it's tahar, you're not allowed to burn it. So really, the rule is with exceptions that if you have truma that's tamei besafek, the owner, it's called that toilin, you leave it hanging. You don't eat it. You can't burn it. You wait either until it decomposes, then it's nothing. Then it's not food, and then you burn it. Or it might become tamei somehow. And if it becomes tamei, then you burn it. So before we come to the burning part, I want to just go back to the Mishnah in Zavachim. If Rab Zera, which he's saying, maybe it's not a vadai, it's a doubt, and it's a rabbinic doubt that we confer on it the status of Truma Tameya. So how does he understand the Mishnah in Zavachim? There you had a limb, vadai, blemished. That limb is not allowed to go on the altar. Rabbi Eliezer, and we also learned midarabanan, that limb is never going to be bottle. It's never bottle. Hegdish is chashuv. So you got a problem. I have many animals. All of them were good. Only one was not good. Only one was blemished. But since a limb of that one got mixed into the 10, into 100, into 1,000, none of them can go on the altar. But Rabbi Eliezer says if a kohen accidentally, not knowing there's a mixture, took one on the altar, we can say that one was the one that fell in. That's a leniency. You know, it's if this din, that the Chachamim were the ones that said the one that fell in is the one that came out, you can't explain the Mishnah in Zavachim that way. The good thing is that in Masechta Zavachim, the Amoyre Rabbi Elazar says Gavaldik. He says that, first of all, the rule that something that's chashuv is not batal is only a rabbinic law. Biblically, everything is nullified in majority. That's important, so we're beginning with that. So the non-bitul is a midrabanan. Number two says the Amoyre Rabbi Elazar, B'shitas Rabbi Eliezer in Zavachim, that even when the kohen accidentally took already the one limb, there was only one blemished animal, and he already put, and let's say the head, and one head was put on the altar. Maybe it's the head from the blemished. Rabbi Eliezer says that a kohen now can put the remaining limbs on the altar, but he has to do it by taking at least two at a time. What's the benefit of taking two at a time? There was only one blemished animal. If a kohen is going to take two, one of the two for sure is okay. If he picks up in his hands two, one of them he can take. Only there that the Chachamim say, since midoraisa it's batel, don't forget. The problem of something chashav / hegdish not being batel is only a rabbinic law. Since what he has in his hands now for sure is okay, part of it, so we say since he can take one of them, he can take the other one of it. So we could explain Rabbi Eliezer. In other words, the Chachamim have the right to be lenient because the whole non-bittul is only a chumrah midrabanan. And like we said, Rabbi Eliezer, the Tana is only speaking about when he takes two limbs at a time. None of that amazing is explained over here. But coming back over here, V'loi moide Rabbi Eliezer, doesn't Rabbi Eliezer hold that besah she'e'elas mitoich tevel? Same concept when you have one soft truma that fell into 100, not of chulin, into 100 of tevel. So first of all, the truma is nullified, but he has to give one to the kohen. But when he gives one to the kohen, maybe the one that he removed was tevel. Rabbi Eliezer said that actually, Rabbi Eliezer did not say it. We did have a Braisa on Daf Memvav. The Braisa did not write any names who authored it, but the Braisa did not quote any consenting opinion. So therefore, the Gemara is presuming the Braisa says that when you, the Balabas, removes one saw to give it to the kohen, you have to treat that one saw as if it's tevel. And what do you have to do? We already explained what you have to do. On that saw, you declare that that 2% is truma, which, by the way, you can give to the kohen. Remember that? And whatever, you resolve every single one of the possibilities. And if you, Rab Simon, would be right, that the understanding of Rabbi Eliezer is that we get to say that the one that fell in is the one that you removed, he saw shenafle, he saw sha also, then then you would be allowed likula. In the case where one saw of truma falls into 100 saw of tevel, you would be able to take one out and give it to the kohen, and the kohen doesn't have to do anything, because this is the one of truma. All of that is a raya l'Rab Ze'era that you misunderstood Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer actually also holds that mida oiraisa, what you removed is chulin. The Chachamim were the ones that conferred on it a status of truma. But now the problem will be is, why do you have to burn it? Amar Rav Mana, First of all, before we go on to the burning it, Rabbana says, Yo'us Amar Rab Ze'eda. The Tanin and the Basra, for our Mishnah's next case. Don't forget, our Mishnah, when it spoke, the Mishnah had two cases where you had the ratio of 100 to 1. The one that we are learning about, and remember that, is that the one soft Truma was Tamei, and the 100 Chulin were Tohairin. But then the Mishnah gave the next case, which is when you had one soft Truma Tohaira, and it fell into 100 saw of Truma, that's Tamei. Now, what do you have to do? You have to remove it, right? You give it to the Kohen, and the Mishnah says when the Kohen gets it, the Kohen has to make sure that he makes it into small loaves, etc. Hold on. If the pshat of Rabbi Eliezer would be that we mamish say halachically that the one that fell in is the one that you took out, you began with Truma Tohaira. The one that you took out should be Truma Tohaira. If the one that you took out is Truma Tohaira, why do you have to take any precautions to prevent it from becoming Tamei when there's no Tumah here? And Rabbi Eliezer doesn't argue with the second case of the Mishnah. Leis Rabbi Eliezer Polik. This is Mamish Gavaldik. Is araya that the din of Rabbi Eliezer is only a chumrah. You only say it l'chumrah. You don't say it l'kula. If you get to say something only l'chumrah, that means it's a rabbinic law. Okay. And the final nail in the coffin, to prove Rab Simon over Rab, to prove Rab, so you have Rab Zera, Rab Simon. Says the Gemara, Amrin Chavraya Kumir Rab Yoisi. The Chavra said to Rab Yoisi that Yo'us Amar Rab Simon. We don't agree with Rab Ze'eda. We have to agree with Rab Simon. Why is that? Because if Rab Ze'eda would be right, that Midoi Raisa, it's nullified. And you have to remove it. That's a din in Choshen Mishpat. The Chachamim were the ones that conferred on the replacements of the status of Truma. Okay. But even if you're going to make it Tamei, it's all a din derabanan. Why would you burn it? We're not allowed to buy. By the way, Tuma derabanan also does not justify burning Truma. If something biblically is tahar, we're not allowed to burn Truma Tohaira. We have to eat it. Now I get it. The Chachamim have the right to say, midrabanan, it's tamei, don't eat it. Okay. And the rule is, with exceptions, that if you have truma that is only tamei, midrabanan, then toilin, not burning it. So dios amar Rab Simon, because the lokain, it's the im lokain. If Rab Simon would not be right, if Rab Ze'eda is right, sarfin as a truma bepnei gedeira. Gedeira means a rabbinic fence. Do we ever burn the truma when you only have a rabbinic issue? No, you don't. So the fact that Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim argue, the Chachamim say Tala v'teyachal. Rabbi Eliezer says Teiroim v'tisarif. Why v'tisarif? If Rabbi Zera would be right, Rabbi Eliezer should have says Teiroim, remove it, and v'toilin oisoi. That is a gavaldik haraya. This the Gemara refutes. So Amar Loin, Rabbi Yosi told to the Chevraya that sided with Rab Simon, you're wrong. And again, I just want to point out that we're very lucky. Again, Mahashgacha Pratis, I think this was the shir of 2 days ago. I know I'm confused with Yontiv. We just learned his dinim in the Rambam. A few days ago. What did we learn in the Rambam? First of all, it's a Mishnah. The Rambam took it from, it's a Mishnah in Taros. The Mishnah says that there are 6 cases of doubt, Tuma by Truma, 6 cases of doubt. By the way, doubt, the rule is Safek, Doiraisa. Let's go noch with the Rambam. Generally, if there's a doubt, you're lenient. Being machmir by a doubt is a rabbinic law. There are 6 cases, the Mishnah writes, where you have a Safek Tuma, and still you got to burn it, the Mishnah says. So there are exceptions. Let me just remind everyone one exception. We just learned this, the din of a Beis HaPras. Now, really, there are many types of a Beis HaPras, many types. But let me give you one case. There was an area in which someone was interred, someone was buried, but that area was plowed over by accident. And the fear, we don't know for sure, that it could be that they put the remains of the person not that deep in the ground, close enough to the surface that the physical plow went into the remains and therefore dismembered it and dragged it as the person was plowing the field. And maybe there's a fragment of a bone on the surface of the land, meaning that when someone walked on it, they had contact with a etzem, with a bone of a corpse, which would mean that they're tamei. I'm saying that dafka that way because if the person is under the ground, if the body is intact, then there is another way where a corpse confers tumas oil. If I walk over a caver today, even though the person is buried 20 feet under, I become tamei, midoiraisa. But if the body is dismembered and there isn't enough of a shear of the mace, it does not impart tuma through oil. But when it comes to contact, even a bone will impart tuma through magan masa, through touching. And that's called the Beis HaPras. So they said that the tuma might have spread for 100 amas. Might, it's a suffix. But the Chachamim said that if a person walks through a Beis HaPras, they're tamei, or if food was taken through a Beis HaPras, the food is tamei. Now you would say, okay, it's tamei midirabanan, but you don't know for sure that there was a fragment of a bone. It's only a suffix. Nevertheless, this is the first of the six. Did we not learn in Masechtas Taharos regarding six? I just gave one, the other five as well, that you burn the truma. Loi mipnei gedera, is it not a geder? And yet sarfen. So once argues Rabbi Yossi to the Chavraya, we find a precedent that the Chachamim, even though the truma was only midrabanan, concluded that the truma is burned. For Hachinami, I can argue, so holds Rabbi Eliezer, that it's only mipnei gedera, like Rab Zera says. It's not a din d'oraisa. Nor was then, nevertheless, sarfen oisa. Now, you don't ask a question, well, if that's the case, according to Rabbi Eliezer, why does the Mishnah say 6 sfekos? The Mishnah should have said 7 sfekos. That's not a kasha. 6 sfekos means that in one sitting over there in Usha, the Sanhedrin paskind the exceptions of the 6 at one time. But it doesn't mean that the Sanhedrin at other times gave other cases where it's really only a derabanan or really only a suffix, and nevertheless, you burn and not toilen. Okay. So now we have two options, Beshitas, Rabbi Eliezer, but let me just repeat again the words of the Chachamim. The Chachamim clearly in the Mishnah, they argue with Rabbi Eliezer. The Chachamim say again, Aviv, halt kop. I know people that went to sleep late last night, that one soft truma temeya fell into 100 soft of chulin tohida. So you have the ratio, the truma's bottle. The Chachamim say you got to give one to the kohen. So you remove one. So the Chachamim say that one which they removed, the kohen is allowed to eat. Aber, he has to make them into small loaves. Again, there are really 4 options. I don't want to repeat them, etc. 4 loaves, etc. I don't understand something. Why does the kohen have to make them into small loaves? The truma was bottle. Clearly, lechachamim vadai mamish bottle. When you removed one saw, biblically it's chulin. Forget about the majority. It's 100 to 1. The chulin was tahar, so it should be tahar. Why is it called truma? Why do you have to give it to the kohen? Because financially, you're not allowed to take that which belongs to the kohen. That the chachamim said, I'm going to confer on it the status of truma, we already explained that. Right? According to Rab Zera, according to Rabbi Eliezer, when they're conferring status of truma, they're saying truma temeya. Let's go misafik. There's some suffix over here. We'll get to that back in a moment. And according to the Chachamim, no, it's truma tohira. Well, if it's truma tohira, why do you have to make it into small loaves? When we learned the Mishnah, we said we'll have to explain it. So Chavraya, now that we are already quoting a conversation between the Chavraya and Rabbi Yossi, who is the Chavraya? Everyone else. Here you see the greatness of Rabbi Yossi. Chavraya, either they said or they asked, but in Kumi Rabbi Yossi, I don't understand the sheet of the Chachamim, manavshach, which either or doesn't work. If you're going to say that the replacement saw, if we're going to say it's like the original, which is Truma Tameya, well, if it's Truma Tameya, then you got to burn it. Well, obviously, they're not saying it's Truma Tameya. Why not? Because it was nullified. What did you have? 100 saw of Chulin. So we're going to give it the status of Chulin. If it has a status of Chulin, why are we b'chlal concerned? Even if it becomes tummy, chulin can be eaten betuma, even by a kohen. Yeah, I know we learned that midrabanan, if you eat the size of a kibetza, a chatzi pras, there is a din that the person becomes tummy. Okay, so if the kohen is going into the Beis Hamikdash, he won't eat it then. But there's no issue with making chulin tummy, and there's no issue with the kohen eating it. So ma bekach sheyitmu, who cares if it becomes tummy? Okay. In other words, let me say like this. The Chachamim certainly hold that he can't burn it. I have a simple kasha. There's nothing wrong with me burning chulin. I know I'm not going into the baltashchis issue. And that can be explained because baltashchis is only when you do something for no purpose. There's a purpose. What's the purpose? Maybe there's tumah here. If a kohen doesn't want to become tummy and he's concerned, he has a law, he can burn food. The Mishnah basically is implying that burn you can't. You know why? Because truma cannot be burnt. So we got a problem over here. The shita of the Chachamim has to be explained, turning the daf Ches Amud Beis. So that is what they asked, the Chavraya asked Rabbi Yossi, Amaloin, to which Rabbi Yossi responds to them, Lav l'shum truma oichla. First of all, I know you're right. Mid the oiraisa, the truma's bottle. I got that. We got that. The removing of one saw is a rabbinic law. Why is it a rabbinic law? Because since you have to remove one saw to give it to the kohen, we are afraid that if we're not going to tell the owner this has a status of truma, he's going to say, I'm going to keep it myself. That I understand. So they conferred on it the status of truma. Okay, Adarab. So the truma is tahoira. Wasn't there some truma here, Aviv? Now, the presumption that we have is that if truma is nullified in the ratio of 100 to 1, we make that automatic link. The truma issue is also nullified 100 to 1. That is not correct. That's what we have to separate. The truma, guys, I'm not a kohen. I'm not allowed to eat truma. So if truma falls into 100 more of it, ratio 100 to 1, I am allowed to eat. Yeah, the 100 to 1 ratio takes away the problem of me not being allowed to eat truma. But when it comes to another issue, that I am not allowed to have truma tohoira become tamei, Adarab, the Chachamim hold that the saw that you removed has the status of truma tohoira. Problem is that there was tuma here. There was one saw of tuma. Ironically, the one saw of tuma was truma. But if you say the truma part, shaboy, was nullified, okay, but the truma was not nullified. So since what you are removing, midrabanan, has a status of truma, but l'shitas chachamim truma tohoira, yes, the tuma was not nullified. That's the sheet of the chachamim. So now I got a new issue. I don't meet the kohen. I don't want for my truma tohoira to become tamei. How will it become tamei? Maybe some of the flour that I, the kohen, received, some of the kernels that I, the kohen, received, some of it is tamei. The tuma is not nullified in 100 to 1. And therefore, the solution is the 4 solutions. The nekudim, the kaloyos, the tilosh v'mei peiros, or to add it into make big loaves, but they should be primarily from tarred flour. Let's read it inside. Loi I atem moedim, do you not agree? Now listen to these words, that just like if she'im noila la safek tuma b'mekoyma, if you have truma, and forget about it falling into chulim. If you have a suffix, if truma is tamei, so we keep on repeating. What's the rule is? You're not allowed to burn it. Right? She'ena yachal l'sarfa ma'ali noila la safek tuma b'makem acher ma'ali noila safek tuma b'mekoyma. What difference does it make if the tuma is coming perhaps from outside or coming from within? Just like truma that has only a suffix. The rule is you may not burn it. Same thing here also. There might be some tuma here. Not in the truma. What you separated is truma tahira. But still, there might be some tuma here because there was tuma in the mixture of 100 to 1. So even though it's a small percent, but it's still called a suffix. And the worst of the worst is that when you only have a suffix tuma, you can't even burn it. You can't even burn it. Why? Because maybe it's not tamei. So therefore, you have to eat it. And the solution will be the nekudim, the koloyos, etc. This is gavaldik.
It's not hard truma. It's suffix truma.
It's no. It's tahar truma, but there might be tuma in it. In other words, maybe some of what's in here is tamei. All of it is called truma midrabanan. All of it is truma. The one thing, this is the one chap. This is gavaldik. The truma is nullified in a ratio of 100 to 1. Forget about the truma issue. Just the truma. A little bit of truma, a lot of tahar. The Gemara is saying that the truma is not nullified. Now, just because it's not nullified, Aviv, it doesn't mean it's all tummy. You have 100 tahar, and it's not even 1%. It's less than 1%, right? It's 1 in 100. There's 101. Some of it is tummy. So when I remove something, there is a small doubt. Maybe some of that is tummy. What are the percents? Very little. So what? Maybe there is a kibetza amount in the saw of tuma. The Chachamim confer on the replacement the status of truma tahoira. But there's a suffix tuma. I can't even burn it. Because when you only have a doubt, you can't burn it. It's a truma you got to eat. On the other hand, I'm not allowed to allow for it to become tamei. So you have to follow that solution. You see, the chap is that the whole time you're learning, if it's batal, it's batal. We're saying the truma problem is batal. Truma problem meaning I'm not a kohen. A non-kohen cannot eat truma. That's nullified. Truma is not batal. Doesn't mean it's there vadai. It's there suffix because it's a very small percent. Gavaldik. Now, Zakti Gemara. I just want to say one thing before we read the next line. Every line is gold over here. The Mishnah gave two cases where you had the ratio. Case number one, which is the case that we're learning about, one saw of Truma Temeya fell into 100 Chulin Tohairin. Case number one. The next case of the Mishnah was the opposite. One saw, guys, halt up, one saw of Truma Tohaira fell into 100 saw of Chulin Temeyin. One saw of Truma Tohaira fell into 100 saw of Chulin Temeyin. There, everyone says you have to remove one, give it to the kohen, but the kohen cannot eat the whole thing at one shot. Make small loaves. Don't forget the percent. Even Abeliezer, the percent of Tamei is huge. There is a third case. The third case is not mentioned in our Mishnah, but there is a Braisa taught by Rabbi Oishia, if you want to ask a question, you chevraya, ask it on the shita that is brought in the Tana Rabbi Oishia. Now, Rabbi Oishia's case is going to blow your mind because you're not going to chop it. Rabbi Oishia adds a third case. What's the third case? Listen to this. You have one saw of Truma Tohaira. You have one saw of Truma Tohaira that fell into, listen to this, 100 saw of Truma Temeya. Not Truma and Chulin. No. One saw of Truma Tohaira that fell into 100 saw of Truma Temeya. What do you think you have to do? What do you do with Truma Temeya? You have to burn it. What happens if you have a doubt? You can't burn it. Why can't you burn it? Because maybe some of it is Tohaira. What do you do when you can't? You'll just let it be, like I said. So that's exactly what you do. It says Rabbi Ishia that saw Truma Tohaira Shenafla Meya, saw Truma Temeya. This is the third case brought by the Tana. Tirkav, you let it rot. Now hold on a second. Why do we say that? Why don't we say, what's the dominant here? Truma Temeya. You know how dominant? Not the majority. 100 to 1. The Tohaira is less than 1%. So why would we not say over here that the Tohoira acquires the status of the vast majority? What's the status of the vast majority? Tamei. And if it's Tamei, then you should be allowed to burn it. In other words, why doesn't the replacement saw take the status of the Truma Tameya? That is a kasha that you can have. Look inside the Rashirilio, 7 lines from the bottom of the right column. Now again, this case is not in the Mishnah. This case is in the Braisa of Rabbi Ishia. Saw Truma Tohira Shelo Yuchshara, that it didn't yet become a Mukhshar. The ain Bekoyach B'meya saw Truma Tameya. Latama, we're saying that therefore when it got mixed in, that in itself did not make it Tameh because it was not Mukhshar yet. And Vatana about Rabbi Ishia, that the rule is you can't burn it. You cannot burn it. You can't burn any of it. You have to wait for it to ratirkav amai va'amai nema. Why don't at least over here we say that batla v'tisarif? And let's speak out the kasha that Rabbi Yossi is telling the Chavraya. This is a kasha because the bishleme b'masnisan in the case of the Mishnah. What's the case of the Mishnah? What's the option? You can eat it. Small loaves. See, when you have an option of where you can eat it. 1 second. Maybe a guy is going to make it into big loaves. That we don't have to say. In other words, in the case of the Mishnah, given the achalahu, to say nigzar buhu the achalahu, so then make a din. You got to eat it like truma, not burn it. Elohachi over here, any ways you can eat it. Here, you cannot even eat it in small loaves. You cannot eat. There's no solution here. If you cannot even eat it in small loaves, you know why you should say you should burn it? Because we should have a fear that by you not burning it immediately, accidentally someone will come to eat it. That's a general fear. So maybe if there's a solution, we say you got to wait. Will a person make a mistake? Will a person eat it properly? I would prefer for you not to burn something that might not be truma tameya. I get that. Over here, midoi raisa, what do we follow the majority? Midoi raisa, what status does it have? Tamei has to be burnt. So you're telling me that, okay, maybe there's something that's not nullified. That does not justify you not burning it immediately where maybe someone is going to eat it. And that's a kasha that's unanswered. And we have 2 more minutes, and I just want to open up Chizkiah. And Chizkiah now is the beginning of the next 2 daf. Says the Gemara. Oh, no, first of all, whenever the Mishnah says Nekudim, we just had this at the end of last year, is Kadah Chatzoisin. Nekudim means a half a saw. Half a saw means okay. Now, I'm just wondering why not a half an egg? See, before we learned that every loaf has to have less than the size of an egg. Here we are allowing for every loaf to have the size of 72 eggs. Why is that? Because we want to make sure how much percent is the tummy produce. It's all mixed together. We're saying it's like 99%. Correct? If the tamei produce is it's less than 1%. We are allowed to make a loaf even in the size of 72 eggs without being afraid that you have a kibetza in it of the tamei. But let's learn. Okay, that's chiddush number 1. Now let's go Chizkiah Amar. We'll stop over here. But we're by the case, 1 saw Truma Tameya, we're still in that case. 1 saw Truma Tameya fell into 100 saw of Chul and Tohidin. You're good? You remove 1 saw. The Chachamim say you got to eat that saw, small loaves. Eat that saw, small loaves.
1 saw of Tameya fell into 100 saw.
Of Tohidin, the one that you give to the Kohen has to be eaten in small loaves. What about the 100 that remain?
Oh, the one that
No. The one that you remove from the mixture. What about the 100 that you keep? What about that? The Mishnah never spoke about it. Says Chizkiah that even the 100 that remain can only be eaten in small loaves. Why would that be?
Probably so it's not truma.
Well, there's no truma. The truma you gave to the kohen. But in the chulin, you're going to remove challah. And challah has a status of truma. And I just want to go back to this word. Truma is nullified in the ratio of 100 to 1. Tuma is not nullified in the ratio 100 to 1. So since there is something still tamei, how can you make a big size loaf from which you're going to remove challah when the challah will be tamei? Misafek. Because tuma is not nullified in the ratio of 100 to 1.